Okay, so today I want to talk basically about the death of Contact Wars, as I've basically not been playing it at all since I think the entirety of this year. I played it a couple times 2018, but I'm generally done with it. And with the death of Contact Wars, I basically mean the degradation in quality of the game and the decrease in the active player base to the point where I do not believe that it's still worth playing. Like, there's no point in starting out right now. So I think I was supposed to make this video a while ago, but then I told myself I have to go to the barber first since it's with a webcam. So that's why I'm like 1 year late with the video. That was my excuse to procrastinate, but now it's finally here. So this isn't a WarDog discussion video if we don't start off with something controversial, which is going to make half the people dislike this video. Do I think the devs or the community ruined the game more? The community, by far. So I think there's generally like two stories to why the game died. There's like my story that I'm gonna tell and my reasons, and that's like the wrong one. So I'm just gonna go through aspects that I believe impacted the game's activity and quality, and in how severe they were to me. So the first real impact I think was in 2015. I think my time's maybe a bit off. Like, I have not cared about this game for about a year. I think in 2015 the server limits changed. The level limits of the servers changed. So we used to have like 10 to 70, level 10 to 70, level 0 to 70, level 20 to 70. And in 2015 that all changed. Like, the servers became 45 to 70 for high levels. So you might think, isn't that a good thing? Isn't that more balance? And that is probably where it all started, where it all went wrong to me. Because when the servers were like level 0 to 70, you would have a couple of really good players, and then you would have a lot of bad players. So the good players didn't mind playing against each other because they could just farm their stats against the bad players anyway. So everybody would end up well anyway if you're good. So back in the day, we had balanced matches. Like, I would play other high levels, and they would play me. Like, you have 2 good players versus 2 good players, and then the rest of your team is just filled with noobs that end up boosting your stats. The opponent's good player stats, and you boost your stats on their bad players. But as soon as it became 45 to 70, everybody was like, oh, we can't boost our stats anymore on like level 0s. So now we must stack our team so hard so we can still do good. So I think everybody except the absolute best players, so like all the above average players that think they're really good but are actually pretty bad, started just stacking. And the way they did this is really pathetic. And it's also the reason why I believe the community is far worse than the devs in this aspect. People would sit in spectator and match, like you probably all know this because people still do it, for like 10-15 minutes just to join the winning team. And then low levels that don't really get the game or just don't really care end up joining the other team. So the community was just so pathetic that they would rather wait 10 plus minutes just so they could have a better team and just stack against other opponents. And the moment those lower level players started leaving, because they were essentially just getting wrecked, the server just ended up dying, and you had like 7 versus 2s with nobody joining. So I think in 2015 it all kind of went downhill, and that's where it really started, the stacking issue. But I definitely don't think at that point the game was decreasing in player base. But when the stacking issue came into play, I think the game decreased in quality a lot. But there's a lot of other reasons. Okay, another controversial thing is hackers. Now you might think I'm gonna say hackers ruined the game. I don't think they did. Like, I do not believe, besides there was a time period where this guy named Raphael had like this really popular cheat that a bunch of people ended up using, and I think for like 1-2 years we had like a noticeable increase in cheaters. But I think from the start of the game to the end, besides that one cheat that boosted the numbers, there were about the same percentage of hackers. The only reason why you would end up getting more bans and more bans is because the player base kept growing. So, because I don't believe there was like a really strong increase in hackers that like continuously kept growing, I don't believe hackers actually degraded the quality of the game. Because it's a free player game, it's a free to play game, I mean, there's always going to be hackers. I think that's just kind of as soon as the game was made, it has a lower quality because of that, but it doesn't actually decrease the quality. So I don't count hackers as in actually causing the death. So this is where somewhat recently, I think 2018, they started really going with this, where a combination of the dev's decision and the absolutely patheticness of the community ruined the balance of the game like completely. The devs once had this holiday, and they decided in the roulette, let's do, I think it was 10 times the odds to win SP. So I think the odds went from 0.1% to 1%. Now that might not sound like a lot, but in reality, if you ended up buying like hundreds of spins, actually, I think, no. But in reality, if you ended up buying like hundreds of spins, you could always consistently win a bunch of SP. So what ended up happening is, you would have these players, like in my Hard Ops video, I mentioned before, why the reason Contact Wars, the player base itself, isn't really interested in paid games is because the community seems to be split between people that don't pay anything, like children, or just generally poor people from third world countries, and this percentage of the player base that spends absolutely hundreds or thousands into the game. So when they increased the odds to gain skill points, this top percentage that spent hundreds and thousands into the game ended up, well, what do you think? They ended up spending hundreds and thousands once more to gain those skill points. So developers do that event where they increase the skill point chances. A huge amount of community members buy a huge amount of spins in the roulette to the point where it's absolutely absurd, and they just keep spinning and spinning to gain skill points. So, fuck off phone. So, you got this really clear gap between players that spent tons in gaining skill points and players that didn't. And that's when the balance in the game was permanently ruined for me. So that was the worst point. Like, that was the point where the balance of the game went absolutely shit. But they had to make it worse. Because I feel like the Conflict Wars devs are like sharks with blood. Like, once a shark smells blood, he's gonna get you, basically. So once you start bleeding from kilometers away, they can smell you and they will get you. I think the Conflict Wars devs are kind of the same with money. So once they did that event once, where they increased the chance of the skill points, you can't stop them at that point. They saw how much money they gained, and at that point, there's either two options. Because at that point, they, in my opinion, use essentially every holiday, every event, everything they could think of as an excuse to raise those skill points. And I think there's only two reasons why they would do that. Just because they generally wanted the money, so they just generally thought, oh, this gains a lot of money, let's do it again. Or because they realized the game was dying, so they were like, let's milk it, like let's milk out its dying breath. And let's still get all the money out of it while we can. So I think as soon as the skill events, the skill point increased odds events, became a regular thing, the game balance is ruined at that point. So then there's two more events that I think impacted it. Another one is, what was it? I remember. It was the game going client mode. So this was hyped up a lot. I think personally it wasn't really useful. Like, the graphics didn't really change, the game didn't really change. For some people it ran smoother, but the thing is, Conflict Wars was a really popular game on Facebook and Congregate and vk.com, not .ru, and so forth. So when you're a really popular game, the community of that site itself is going to go to the game tab and they see Conflict Wars, like, really popular game, play this. And that's where you gain your players. Because Conflict Wars does not have like some great campaign or some great ads. They don't have huge YouTubers making videos about it. I think the entire point, almost the entire new player base came from just seeing the game on their site where they found it, just because it was really popular there. Like, credits to Tarjay Bracker, like Danarix, for bringing up this point, because I didn't think of it myself, but I do agree with it completely. So the moment the devs decide, let's make this game client mode, what happens is the current player base moves over to client mode. And then what? Where are you going to get new players? Who is going to find your game? I don't get it at all. And I think in hindsight that was a really stupid decision, because the gains of a client mode game were like nothing compared to how there's basically no real increase in new players. Because simply, where do you find the game? And the last point that I wanted to make, where I think the game really, the point where the devs basically gave up on it for me, is because with the release of Escape from Tarkov. Escape from Tarkov was overhyped in my opinion. Like, a lot of big YouTubers started talking about it. It gained a lot of traction and it got a really popular start. So it's actually like a pretty successful game, although I don't think it deserves it. But the thing about Escape from Tarkov is that now they have a successful paid game. So you see like this huge decrease in Contact Wars updates, the frequency. Like when did they update something important basically? Like there's basically no frequent updates anymore. And I think that is because they're basically focusing on Escape from Tarkov. Contact Wars isn't their only source of income anymore. So essentially I just think they care less about it. Like as soon as a game dev releases a new game, that's where the focus is gonna go to. So at this point I feel like there's not gonna be any meaningful updates to Contact Wars anymore. So I don't really see how it's supposed to be saved. I just think it's slowly dying now to the point where it's just gonna be dead at some point, but there's nothing gonna change to it. And speaking of updates, one more point that I think some people think it's a reason is weapon customization. Like, I think that's bullshit. All weapon customization basically did is made some good guns worse and some worse guns better. Like, I don't think people quit over it. I just think that there's a couple people whining over it, but I don't think it actually affects the game quality or the size of the active player base. So those were basically the main points why I think the game quality decreased and why the active player base in itself got smaller. So some people may think the game isn't dying at all. Some people may think it's already dead, and some people just think it's dying now. But either way, seeing how Escape from Tarkov is basically the main focus inspired me to make this video now. And yeah, I just finally stopped being lazy to make it. I wanted to make it like a year ago, but let's ignore that. So if you liked the video, you can like it. People that dislike it anyway, so I don't have to tell you. You can subscribe, probably not for more Contact Wars videos unless people request certain topics, but I'm done playing it. But if people want to hear discussion videos on a certain topic, I don't mind doing them. But still subscribe for like CSGO and shit, because I'm actually getting decent. So yeah, until the next video.